Hi, I'm John Greene, and over the years, I've had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time with cybersecurity executives and getting an understanding of how they build a vision for their program, the technology that powers it, and the policies and processes their teams use to execute against it. Today, I was lucky enough to have a conversation with longtime industry veteran Paul Drapeau. Let's hear what he has to say.
So yeah, I started out pretty classical computer science background, computer science degree. Came out into the tail end of the .com thing, bounced around a few little .coms. No real huge successes there. Ended up doing security for Staples.com, actually the e-com website.
Cool.
And really, started the security career proper there, I would say. From there, I went to Vertex Pharmaceuticals here in Boston. I was there for 13 years. I would say first real information security hire there at Vertex. It was in the IT networking world at the time. But yeah, I stayed on there for 13 years. Ended up leading the security team, networking team. Did a bunch of interesting things there. Super interesting industry. Obviously, the pharmaceutical industry, learned a bunch. Company grew immensely at the time that I was there.
Yeah, I might have heard of it a few times.
Left Vertex to go to a little startup called Confer.
Okay.
We were operating in the EDR space, and eventually got acquired there by Carbon Black and VMware. I was doing threat research there, which gave me a really interesting picture of what attackers were actually doing, and shifted into a product architecture role where I was helping get those threat research outputs into the product as product features for efficacy, et cetera. Left that and as you said, did some consulting. I was at Kroll Cyber for a bit of time. Basically, my role there was helping incident response customers that had real serious breaches, kind of helping them at the tail end of our engagement with them to rebuild their security programs, build a security program if they didn't have one. And then now I've been at New Balance Athletics. I've been there for just under 4 years, run the security program there, manage the team, et cetera. It's been a really interesting journey.
Yeah, so you've seen this industry over the years from a lot of different angles. So it's really cool, because a lot of times people find their niche and they kind of stay with it. But it seems like you've bounced around and been able to look at the same problem from a couple of different sides, which is cool for perspective. How did you originally get into cyber as a whole? Like, you started out in IT, and then what drew you to information security or IT security?
I think it's an interesting problem in the general technology and IT space. There is an adversary, so we're playing this game against somebody. And that's incredibly different than a lot of other technology domains. In the classical IT infrastructure world, you're certainly fighting against things that can go wrong. Your data center floods or the server crashes or those types of things. But those are often things that are sort of happening to you. Whereas in the cyberspace, there is an active adversary that is playing this game against you. And in a way, there's a competitive aspect of that appeals to me. But I think really the biggest piece of it is helping the good guys in that scenario. That's been a thread throughout my career, right? Doing security in support of big enterprise that's doing something like making pharmaceuticals to help a patient, or building amazing athletic wear and footwear products, right?
Sure.
So those are the good guys in that story, and just helping them and stopping that adversary has been just a big piece of it. I think I got most of my appreciation from that really when I was in the threat research roles.
Yeah, definitely.
Seeing the tools, the techniques, and really understanding what those folks were doing. That it wasn't, at that time, certainly it wasn't, a 13-year-old kid in their parents' basement or something. These are like massive criminal enterprises that are looking to hurt people and make money or achieve whatever goal they're after, right? So I think I look at it like that as a contest between the good guys and the bad guys, and I like to see the good guys win.
I love that. I think, nowadays, especially as you talk about the industry as a whole and how it's evolved, sometimes you can get into sort of the architecture, the technology, the trends, the buzzwords, and then lose sight of the adversary. But you had a lot of experience both at Confer as the IT security generalist, and then after the fact at Kroll, at understanding like attacker techniques. It's really interesting that you talked about like a competition. I think a lot of times people lose sight of that. I guess like as you've evolved and developed into a leader of an enterprise organization, how has that sort of adversary competition informed how you've looked at implementing controls and building processes and stuff?
I think sometimes people look at something like threat intelligence, for example, as an aspect of a program that is well along the maturity curve, or something that you might add later in a journey of building or rebuilding a program.
Totally. I've talked to companies and to a lot of people like that, and that's like a third, fourth order of effects, often like a nice to have. They're relying on open source. Yeah, without a doubt.
But I would say, I would take a slightly opposite view, a completely opposite view on that. I lean into that early in a program, right? It helps you prioritize because, you can do a lot of security for security's sake or technology for technology's sake, controls for control's sake. You really have to take a step back and think about why you're doing that, right? And if you have an understanding of the adversary, their tool set, their end goals, and those types of things, and then you layer that on top of the organization that you're trying to secure, you get a good sense of where you need to prioritize your efforts. That's number one.
Sure.
Number two is, I think as security leaders inside of an organization, we're relied upon to essentially know what's going on in this space and communicate it out to the rest of the leadership. It's not uncommon for someone like me or myself completely to get a question from a senior leader in the business about something that's maybe going on in the world stage.
Totally.
And then
especially nowadays, right?
Yeah, especially nowadays, right? 100%. I mean, InfoSec is a geopolitical risk. Geopolitical risk is an InfoSec risk. So to think about threat intelligence maybe more from that finished threat intelligence product side of things, where you can say, hey, these are the adversaries that are relevant to this larger question that you asked me, and this is how information security plays into that. Helps me help other people in the business prioritize how they're thinking about risk and what they might do or not do in the context of those things that are happening out there. So I think it's like this really great double-edged sword where you can get a lot of value to prioritizing your InfoSec program and getting the necessary controls in place that are really effective against what you're going to see from a threat perspective, but also one of those ways that you can branch out and really help and enable the rest of the business to make good decisions about risk.
Yeah, that's a critical function that sometimes you can see people struggle with. It's like that. It's less on the tech and the controls and the processes or even the team, and more on the ability to synthesize what is happening externally to how it pertains to the business specifically and communicate that effectively. And I think that last piece is often what separates really mature programs that are stable and solid and developing, and ones that you kind of see the rinse and repeat, like kind of refreshed over every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I agree.
How is like, we talked a little bit about the changes that have been going on with the underlying technology. I want to talk about tech and like on the vendor side, and you have a nice perspective being on both sides of it there, but you really piqued my interest with the adversary stuff. So like, I guess as we think about the move from on-prem to SaaS to cloud to now AI, how have you seen the adversaries change, and how has that changed your perspective or philosophy on building security programs?
Yeah. So the adversaries have the same tooling and capabilities that we do. So when you look at something like cloud infrastructure or AI now, right? I mean, there's tremendous interest in the adversary landscape on AI, right? So, it enables them to do the same types of things that it enables us to do. Operate faster, lower the barrier to entry, all of those things. So, but also it changes their targeting, right? I mean, people talk a lot now about the cloud-conscious adversaries, like adversaries that really deeply understand how cloud infrastructure works. and essentially leverage those features in their attack chain. So a simple way to think about it is you're seeing a lot of adversarial activity now that's moved off of the traditional endpoint. I think generally because we've gotten pretty good at protecting that because of what some of the organizations that I work for did, as well as others, right? So I think we've gotten pretty good at protecting the traditional endpoint when you're talking about fully cloud-enabled SaaS and identity and those sort of things. And we don't have the same kind of sensors there. We haven't really thought as much for as long about how to crunch that data and detect the adversary activities there. So they're obviously taking advantage of that for sure. All of those technologies allow us to scale faster and do things bigger, do things more at scale, et cetera. So flip that to the adversary side. All of a sudden, you've got an adversary that can, if they know what they're doing, can leverage cloud infrastructure to do their stuff faster at scale, et cetera. So I think it's one of those things that, as much as it helps us, whenever we look at a technology like that as an enabler for us, for the good guys, it's certainly the bad guys that are good at their job are looking at it in the same way.
Yeah. So how does that manifest in how you change your approach in like your program and how your team is addressing some of the common problems from the past and some of the ones that persisted that haven't changed, from the old days to now?
Yeah, it's almost like an exercise of ruthless prioritization, right?
Ruthless prioritization.
Because you said it like something in the past. You've still got the problems of the past,
right?
And you've got a lot of problems that are new and emerging because of all of the things that we just talked about, right? So maybe the shiniest, newest thing is not the place where you need to put the focus,
right?
Because you've got this lingering problem from the past, or you've perhaps just discovered a problem that you didn't know existed, and because it was prior and existing in the organization, right? Making that decision between what you focus on in any given day, the shiny new problem or the existing problem, is really I think a difficult risk concept to wrap your head around, but you have to do it because there is a lot of maybe we can use the term debt in this space. I think in any organization,
absolutely,
there's existing risks that of, existing vulnerabilities and those things, and then suddenly there's something new. Well, do you work on the new thing, or do you work on that thing that you already know and understand is a pretty decent risk for the organization? Lots of stuff goes into that, but it's a prioritization problem.
Yeah, I guess that probably goes to threat intelligence being at the cornerstone of some of your decision making.
Oh yeah. Great example. Is an attacker actually attacking that thing?
Right. Yeah.
If an attacker is actually if an attacker that cares about you, or an organization like you is actually attacking that thing in the real world, okay, that rises to the top of the priority list. 100%. Yeah. What
are some other things that go into that ruthless prioritization? I'm going to steal that phrase and make believe I made it up.
The key aspect of that is, from my perspective, it is not getting distracted by again, I said the shiny thing, but also there can be noise. There can be noise in the industry. There can be noise in the business. There can be noise from maybe from within your own team. And I think it's our job as leaders to tune that out. Take a breath, and think about it for a moment. Now, there's something that comes with that. When you're talking about prioritization, it means you're choosing to do one thing and you're choosing to not do something else. Right? That means you're leaving some risk on the table, and I think that is part of our jobs, and that's a hard thing for some people to really maybe embrace or to get right with, but. Someone smarter than me said it. I heard someone say it. You get paid to eat risk. You don't get paid to eat all the risk. So there's certainly times when you have to elevate those things and say, I can't. Like A and B are equal prioritization, equal risk to the organization. There's business drivers on both sides of this. I need leadership around me to help make some of those decisions. But there are certainly times when I think we as information security leaders have to be pretty comfortable with living in a land of I made a call, and I made a call for the reasons that were right at time and what I knew, and part of our job is to absorb some of that and take on some of that risk for the wider organization, for our teams, et cetera. So prioritization, you have to be okay with doing that, and I think that you have to be transparent as to why you're picking maybe A versus B, et cetera, so that for yourself and for the rest of the organization or whoever you're serving. I picked A because of these reasons. That's what we knew at the time. Maybe that went right, maybe that went wrong, but we know why we did it. Yeah. And if we were wrong, we'll get better at it later.
Very good. Yeah, that sounds like a big source of stress, especially for someone who's like new to the job, right?
Yes.
Like when you've built a lot of programs, or actually you might want to talk a little bit about your time in consulting, because I find that you probably have a lot of breadth of experience when it comes to looking at many different kinds of security programs. Yeah. Like looking at some of the ones that you were consulting on, looking at some of the programs that you built or start, like when you're trying to develop that muscle or that organ to tune itself to make the right call in that relentless or ruthless prioritization process as a leader you need to do, what are some of the things you look for to help other leaders that you're either consulting with or you've done to help yourself to build that muscle and to tune out the noise? Like, what are some strategies you've seen work?
So a couple of things. One, checkbox security doesn't work. And whenever anyone brings up the fact that maybe I've seen a breadth of organizations from consulting, and I think anybody that's talked to more than a few organizations in this space and thinks about the problem of what works and what doesn't. Yeah. Checkbox security doesn't work.
What does that mean to you? I think that like, especially coming from the vendor side, like I've worked at places and have talked to people where like, that's a great way to undercut like a competition. It's checkbox, check the box. Yeah. So like, what is it? But I think it like could mean a lot of different things. What does that mean to you?
I absolutely despise yes or no questions in this space of any kind. So if it comes on a security evaluation questionnaire, if it comes on, if someone asks you, do you have control ABC? So when I think of checkbox security, I'm thinking of someone who's pulling out something like NIST CSF or whatever, and just has and essentially has yes or no answers on it. Right. There is no such thing as a yes or no answer in any organization of any size and complexity. So when I look at programs and I say, oh, you're dangerously thinking about this from a checkbox perspective, it's like it looks like a bunch of yeses and maybe a couple of nos where people are being pretty honest, but there's gradations there. So if you're looking at something on a pure yes, no, have, don't have basis, that's an indicator. I think I know maturity models are a much better way to look at that problem. Like,
absolutely.
Here's my set of controls, and I'm a 1. I'm pretty low on the maturity scale over here. I'm a 5 over here, right? Yeah. And not every organization, by the way, needs to be a 5
in each domain,
in each domain and everywhere and across all the controls. And I think that's where people get tied up, right? They say, like, maybe this where we are with this piece of the program is good enough for us. Now, obviously, there's a baseline that's 100% required across the board, right? I think sometimes people do get tied around thinking that they're so much different or so much more special than another organization where they can pick and choose and we ignore that here because reasons A, B, C. Very rarely there's probably opportunity to make a statement like that. So I'd rather have organizations that are looking at where they are on maturity curves, thinking realistically about where they should be and where they want to be, and building those plans. Again, based on and informed by all the things that we've been talking about previously. I said compliance isn't security, security is not compliance, because I think one of the ways people tie themselves up in that is compliance programs are generally looking at these things as yes or no type scenarios, pass or fail type scenarios. So
black and white. Yeah, and you're talking about a really broad shade of gray.
Yeah, you get programs that teach to the test from a compliance standpoint, and and you can get hurt doing that because you're trying to check boxes. That's when I say checkbox security, that's what I'm talking about. It's making those decisions to get a yes somewhere for some reason, and not really thinking about measuring it for me, this organization, the time and space we're in and all of those things.
Yeah.
And then you get to that point where someone has all the yeses on the questionnaire, and yet they still suffer a breach. I'm not saying an organization that's thought about it from a maturity model standpoint is never going to experience a breach either. But I think when you've handed maybe senior leadership, executive leadership, a bunch of yeses all the time, and then there's a breach, you get a much different question when something bad happens. Well, we checked all the boxes. Why are we here? Well,
Totally.
Yeah.
Kind of erodes trust too for like that future growth of that particular program, right?
Yeah.
Because it gives the perception of completeness when in actuality, like you're tending a garden, right? When you're a technology leader as opposed to building a house, like it's going to grow and change and evolve, right?
Excellent analogy. Yeah.
Yeah,
100%,
that's really interesting. Well, you brought up compliance and talking about sort of where we are, the moment we're in, cloud, AI, evolving technology. Compliance has a place there, and as a business leader, it's an important thing, and it can help you, and it also can hurt you on your journey. I guess talk about some times where compliance has been of use to you, and maybe how do you think about it now in the modern age as a way to help keep focused and with that relentless prioritization, but not fall into that check the box trap that you described.
Compliance can certainly be a driver.
Yeah.
When people are asking why should we do this? If you're really getting those kind of questions and you have a compliance play, it does help get the ball rolling. Let's put it that way. It also helps answer the question that I was talking about previously, where is our organization really that special and that different? Well, it probably is in some ways, and it probably isn't in other ways. So I've worked across that spectrum in different places in my career. Obviously, pharmaceutical company, publicly traded pharmaceutical company, Sarbanes-Oxley, FDA.
Yep.
There's a lot of people paying attention to different areas and aspects of that business. And to be honest, there are certain, because of that, there are certain aspects of a security program that you don't have to, quote, fight as hard for, right?
Yeah.
Policy and procedure and standard operating procedures and things like that are very well understood in that industry and are sort of benchmarks and cornerstones of compliance with the FDA. And at the end of the day, especially in the stage of the company that I was in, that's one of the primary risks to the organization, right? Like assuming your drug is working, and you're getting positive results from clinical trials, like your next biggest risk is a regulatory risk, right? So you get a lot of attention on the controls that are necessary in those places, and in those organizations you get pretty high maturity push because of that. Maybe smaller organizations on the startup side of things, et cetera. At earlier times in my career, didn't have heavy compliance or regulatory measurements. That's changing. I didn't have. When I was at Confer, we were working on SaaS EDR, right? I early on, we didn't have customers asking us about things like SOC 2 and that sort of FedRAMP, right? Yeah, 100%. But that's changed over time. The business that we're in now, the athletic shoe and apparel. There's no one that regulates that. There are regulatory items there, but we're a retail company, so PCI, right, is there, and I think that's like an area where any organization, for example, big or small, doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're taking credit card numbers, you have PCI scope, right? This is everything from a multi-billion-dollar brick and mortar retailer, an e-com retailer, to the pizza joint down the road. And I definitely know there are organizations that don't necessarily appreciate that. I think regulatory and compliance type things can be drivers. You don't necessarily get that driver in every organization as much.
Totally. So thinking about some of the drivers that we're seeing today, we talked a lot earlier about some of the parallels between this next phase, this next evolution of where we're seeing a lot of the technology and these programs go with AI to the last big sort of inflection point, which was cloud. But the way the business has sort of demanded it or interacted with it seems a little bit different. I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, 100%. There were probably like non-technical executive leaders of companies that were asking for cloud transitions. But I think that it was sort of a two-stage question. We were looking at like a cloud transition, for example, for all of the reasons that we know people went to cloud. You know, scalability, economics, physical footprint, power and cooling, and all those things that people were struggling with there. So it was like a second order effect. I want to save money. I want to be more flexible in scaling. I want a better real estate footprint and all those things. Like those are the business drivers for those kinds of transitions. And it was technology leaders that were coming with the solution to that. Well, hey, the solution to that is essentially run the computers in someone else's data center and get advantage of the advantage of the economy of scale. On the AI side, I see it completely different. Like non-technical leaders are asking for AI. They're seeing it as potential competitive advantage for sure. They're immediately seeing that efficiency potential and value. So rather than asking for it, I think in more abstract ways, they're asking for it in more explicit ways to either be used in an organization or integrated into products or those sorts of things. You can over-rotate on that. 100%. I mean, we all know how those hype cycles can tend to work. Yeah. I think this one's here to stay. Obviously, So but it is different in the way it's being asked for.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard it described like that before. So, like in the last sort of inflection point with cloud, you're saying there was a set of problems that cloud solved for it, but the business was leading with the problems. But in this particular one, the business is aware of a potential solution in AI, and they're leading with that, and then kind of leaving to the leadership like, hey, how can we know that this is a thing. Maybe like how it was for cloud that helped our stock price. We got a little bit lean on real estate. We shaved some money off headcount or whatever it was that they ended up doing to make a great business move to go to the cloud. This is the next thing, right? Can you go figure out how we can use it? How has that affected someone like you in like your position?
Security is always in a really interesting position in these transitions. The historic statement, "Don't be the Department of No," around security applies here probably more than it ever has in the past. But you're sort of faced with this dichotomy, right? So as security leaders, we need to look at risk. We need to look at risk of emerging technology like AI, and we need to, I think, fairly explain and represent that to the requester. We also need to do what we can to mitigate, or if we can, eliminate those risks where possible. So we have this hat that we wear where we have to talk about and think about these things as potential risk, and figure out how to solve for that risk. But then the other side of that coin is, as we were talking about the adversary is making use of these tools. Attacks are moving faster. We're not getting infinite people or technology from a information security program resource standpoint. And there's incredible opportunity in these technologies. So you absolutely cannot be the Department of No for the like outside of information security requester, and you definitely can't be it for yourself. So you have to be in this world where you're saying, hey, there are some risks with this thing, but there's incredible opportunity. And by the way, I better take advantage of that opportunity within my own program, or we're going to be left behind. We as professionals are going to be left behind. The people that work for us are going to be left behind. And it's just frankly not smart to leave that much capability on the table and not leverage it. So you're sort of wearing two hats. You're this proponent of the change, and you're the risk person in the room on the change. So think about a time when I was at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. I was in the networking side of things, and that was a time when enterprises were really starting to embrace wireless, right? So envision a security person then who said no. No, we're not using wireless technology in our environment. It's too risky. The network doesn't have wires anymore. It goes outside of our walls. That was I wouldn't say that was a reasonable statement for someone to make, but if you looked at it from purely a risk lens, we could as an enterprise have wires just like we had yesterday, and we take this potential risk off of the table. No, what did we do? We started to develop controls around that. Did we get it perfect every time? No, like CWEP, right? Yeah. But over time, you develop really good controls for that. It becomes fully adopted, et cetera. And I would guess to say that any information security person that was the stick in the mud at that point and said, "Thou shalt never use wireless in my environment," you weren't really enabling the business at that point. So AI I look at AI as really an analogous thing to that. I mean, it's totally different from a scope of technology change sort of thing, but just imagine being that 20 years from now, that person who was saying, "Thou shalt never use AI in my organization," it's not gonna fly.
Yeah, totally. How does that affect like you as a leader, considering that there's other liabilities to you personally when it comes to like your program and stuff like that? Like when you're kind of in this zone where it's always been this way, where like you're balancing the do versus the do not, like the shutting things down and being air gapped, right? Versus opening things up and being completely open to the world. There's always that balance. I guess like how has that changed today as far as how you weigh those decisions personally, right? Yeah. You're going to do what's right by the company, but you're also in a position where you're the guy making the call on some of this stuff, and with so much risk and so much sort of opportunity for things to go wrong. Like I guess how do you handle that?
That's the job, number one. I mean, you do have to swallow that pill. You do have to think about that and say that's what people are paying someone like me to do. That's number one. Number two, don't do it in a vacuum. Right. You have to be really, really transparent about those types. As I said, you have to be really, really transparent about those types of trade-offs and those types of discussions. And when I say don't do it in a vacuum, I think sometimes we as information security people think about it like the fact that we're in the dark on the wall alone and there's nobody with us. But that's absolutely not true. Okay. Number one, get really friendly with your general counsel. And if you don't own privacy, get really friendly with the people in your organization that own privacy. Yeah. Get really friendly with the people in your organization that own other types of risk. And that's the body of people that you start having these discussions with and around. Because there are all of those dynamics in every single choice that we're talking about making, right? When we're talking about the regulatory landscape, there's huge legal implications to that, right? Yeah. We're talking about taking e-commerce orders or retail or whatever. Like, there's huge privacy implications to all of that stuff. So you do have to own your piece of it 100%, and you have to advise on your piece of it, but you do not make these calls 100% in a vacuum, and make sure you're attaching yourself and from a relationship perspective and from the decision-making perspective that you're going through to these other folks in the organization that have a piece of it. Because frankly, they might have a lens that you don't understand. They might have a way to look at that decision that informs you that maybe you should make the other choice, right? Maybe I'm not a lawyer. When I talk to a lawyer, and they might say, "We can't do that. That's illegal." Okay.
That's an easy good. That's an easy call. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Or you talk to someone who owns a finance risk. Well, we just can't do that because it's so prohibitively expensive for us, or we're leaving way too much business opportunity on the table if we do that. Okay. Well, now you're looking at it in a little bit of a different light. You've had that communication with someone else in the business, and you're not alone anymore. If you start to feel alone, that's probably a dangerous feeling that you want to explore and think about why.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I think it's cool to hear, because a lot of what you're talking about as ways to sort of mitigate this aren't like technical. There isn't like a silver bullet technology or process you can build. Like, it's really about building consensus and to have like a collaborative discussion between the different lines of business, the leaders, and your own team to try to make sure that you're continually like directing the ship through these sort of changing tides as they come and go. When you're looking at that and thinking about all of the things that you need to get buy-in for, there's like an element of politics for it. You can't be the department of no. Yeah. You also can't be the department of like
always.
Yes, always, right? Like, so I guess like how do you square that circle when you're trying to play nice in the zoo or whatever, play nice, do the right thing, but also when you have to make a tough call, and there is there's different perspectives there. And you've got a lot of experience like this too, because you had to help guide people to do that themselves when you were building programs.
You have to know what is key and core and important to the business. I mean, obviously there's going to be some outside drivers, right? Like we said, legal, regulatory. There's going to be some no compromise type scenarios in those, or super little compromise. But you have to really understand, what is important to the organization that you're in, and by that I mean you need to have some. It is now, I think, a lot more about people and the organization and business risk and all of that than it is about technology in some senses, right? I mean, we're talking about technology risk, we're talking about some technology solutions to risk problems, for sure. But you're entirely right when you say a lot of the job is a people and a negotiation and those types of things. Back to what's important to the business, you have to have really serious conversations with the leaders around you as to what they value from a risk standpoint. Like it's the proverbial "what keeps you up at night" question. But it's only I ask that question in two ways when I'm asking that question. One, which risk scares you the most?
Right.
An operational risk, a financial risk, or a reputational risk, like some broad categories of risk. Like think about that, because people are going to answer. Organizations are going to answer that question in different ways. You might have an organization that is like, financial risk is 100% the most important thing for us. Okay, cool. You might have another organization that says, I'll take some operational impact, I'll take some financial impact. I can't have my reputation damaged. Right. So that's like number one. Think about how the organization is thinking about risk. That helps you navigate a lot, because then when you say, okay, here's a problem that could be manifested, here's a vulnerability that could be manifested. How is it going to impact me? It's going to impact me operationally. Well, okay, my organization can absorb some operational impact in that space. The leader there told me, and we had a really great conversation about that. Here's this other problem in that space. It's going to cost them millions of dollars if it's well, okay, and they told me financial is the most important to them. Okay, great, I'm going to do that. So you have to have that conversation. And then the other question that I always ask when I'm having these types of conversations is, outside of information security, tell me what keeps you up at night. Because that's when you really get into the, okay, what is this person in their role or their department or whatever, like what do they really care about on a day-to-day basis? And then it's your job at that point to think about, like, well, what are the information security risks associated to that. And it might be something like, I've gotten answers to that question that are just like completely outside of the realm of things that you would even think about, right? I mean, they just keep it generic, but imagine talking to a person who's responsible for like logistics for a large scale organization like ours. Their information security risk answer is going to be one thing, and you need to input that, but they're going to tell you something about a risk to the logistics and supply chain that probably isn't an information security risk. But you can go back and think about it and say, there are some information security dynamics to that particular risk, and I'll do what I can to support that. And I'll keep that in the back of my mind when I'm making a decision about a system there, or when someone tells me about a project in that space. Okay, now I know a little bit more about that business. I know what that leader cares about. I know it would hurt us there.
Very good. Yeah, that seems like really important. A lot of what you're talking about from the top of this conversation to where we are now is a way to sort of deal with the gradient nature of cybersecurity.
It's ambiguous. It's ambiguous.
That ambiguity is to have like a series of like strong, consistent, ongoing conversations to develop that North Star. So like everything's basically built off of these different conversations that you've synthesized into creating a path forward for the team, and then communicating and keeping that visible down to the team.
Keep that visible. You're saying it right now.
Yeah.
Document it, keep it visible, push it back out. Check me. Like I had this conversation with a bunch of leaders. Now here's slideware or whatever. At some point in our career, we stop coding and we start working on PowerPoint, right?
Yeah.
And that's your output. You take the PowerPoint output, you push that back out, and you say, this is what I heard. This is the decisions I'm making based on that. This is my roadmap based on that. Do we agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or am I way off base? Because if I'm way off base, stop me now.
Yeah. Now's the time.
Yeah.
That's key. And so when you're thinking about taking that and building that North Star, going back to that original thing around threat intelligence, and one of the biggest challenges you have is like cutting out noise, right? And doing that, how do you cut out noise for some of your stakeholders while keeping them informed?
Yeah. The sky's not always falling
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, remember that the sky's not always falling. If you go to people with your hair on fire all the time, and everything's the biggest risk, et cetera. Back to the conversation we were having about absorbing some of that risk in your role, you're gonna you lose credibility there. On the tech side, like we've talked a lot about this relationship stuff. On the tech side, that's super valuable too. I like look at something like vulnerability management, or code defects, or infrastructure vulnerability management, or something like that. Like any of those aspects, like you can really overplay your hand in some of those disciplines and drive other people nuts in a way, right? We've said ruthless prioritization a few times, and maybe that'll be the tagline, subtitle of this podcast. But like you owe it to all the people around you to make prioritization decisions there, like what you raise up, because you become very uncredible if the sky is always falling and this is always the most critical vulnerability. There's scoring metrics and things like that, but at the end of the day, no senior leader cares about a CVSS score. They care about the kind of risks that we were talking about before. So once you've inputted all that, you can prioritize your message outbound in those ways. And in a sense, it's a lot of work. It's harder than just like
lobbing it over the fence.
But that's again, I think what they're paying us to do in some ways, and I think that is a place where technology can help us, right? We've been talking a lot about the not technology side of this, but whenever you're taking those like large piles of information and trying to synthesize it down and score it and do those things, that's a technology problem, 100%. You need good tools in that space.
Yeah, and obviously, little bit of vested interest in dropping it, but having that's a place where AI can help. Right? Like taking a large volume of data, filtering it down, and applying a lot of different statistical analytics to it. There's a great opportunity, similar to what cloud did to scale systems, right?
Yeah, as long as it's somewhat customizable, right? I mean, I know you and I have had previous conversations about like what I would call like the 90% problem or the 99% problem, where like technology gets broadly, because technology vendors essentially have to address a wider market than just me. Technology sort of gets tuned to the 90% to the 90 percentile. I need levers inside of technology where I can say, this piece is more important to me. I know it. I know that from this area of my business, maybe this set of vulnerabilities is much more higher priority there than it is in other places. Much higher criticality there. Because I know, hey, like there we've got a bunch of consumer information. These are the types of vulnerabilities that expose consumer information. Those are much higher priority in that space. So that's an area where I really would send a message out to the vendor community and say, I understand you need to address a 99%, however you want to look at it, market problem, but I need some levers within whatever technology I'm talking about to do that little last bit of tuning that makes it good for my organization. Again, not every organization is a special snowflake, most are not, but every organization does have nuances and all the things we've just been talking about that I need to be able to translate into the tech and tools that enable my program to make this easier. Otherwise, it's 100% a people problem, and you're not going to solve it that way. But AI is, I think, a lot of opportunity. That's the data science problem, ingest a lot of data, as you said, and output it. It'd be great if if I could just tell a tool, what's important to me in this area of my business is financial risk. What's important to me in this other area of my business is operational risk. This area of my business really cares about reputational risk. Okay, now crunch the data and give me the magic. But there's no silver bullet in technology. I mean, we've all been doing this for quite a bit of time. If there was a silver bullet, we would have found it already, and
none of us would have jobs.
We'd be doing something else.
We'd all be farming somewhere. That's funny. Well, I love that tip too to vendors, right? Like on that different element of, hey, how do I get it the last mile to serve me? How am I able to take the broad learnings that you have across all your customers and then siphon it down to like what really matters? When you think about other elements of the industry and being on, again, both sides of the fence, we'll keep going to that. You talked about that sort of ambulance chasing aspect of cyber, right? And I think the industry at large is, and people complain, there's a whole LinkedIn cottage industry of LinkedIn influencers telling us how bad we are at doing this. But there was like this moment when the industry wasn't really well understood outside of IT, where in order to get the time and attention and resources required to meet the risk that was actually there was on both sides a huge proliferation of this is the magic bullet, or this is the pill that we need. This is the Ozempic, right? Of our cybersecurity program, and then the next quarter or the next year there would be the next one, and we've seen budgets and headcount climb to go and manage and meet those tools, and then folks kind of were left in the zone of, well, we're not any better than we were when we were spending less on this. And so when you're like dealing with that, now that we're kind of out of this educational period with businesses on cybersecurity and more on the operational, like everyone's at least cyber aware, maybe not to the point where
we'd want them to be.
We want them to be, and they're not as bought in, and they're managing and balancing the risks to their intentions and with what you're bringing to them. I guess, like, what advice do you have to vendors that are out there, being that you've been on the other side of it, when it comes to highlighting the problem that they solve without necessarily pathologizing it as like the problem or the solution? Like when you're looking at technologies, like how do you want to be approached, and how do you generally think about stuff like that?
Good question. Like so many dynamics, so many aspects of that question, so many dimensions of that question. I think. So I will say, having been on the vendor side, if you have something legitimately new to say, if you have a risk or something that you really know about that I don't necessarily know about or understand, it's okay for you to be loud there. I just stop at the edge of over-promising, right? I mean, like in the EDR world, we were solving a problem that we knew existed that many customers actually didn't know existed. They didn't understand like why or how things were bypassing the traditional security controls that were on the endpoint at that time, right? So we had to get a message out that there was essentially this set of attacks or this risk that you don't actually know about. Now you can overpromise that, like you said, we're 100% effective. Any vendor that tells me they're 100% effective, I immediately know is lying, and I think anybody in the industry immediately knows is lying. But once you've been on the product side, like, whoa, like we know, So like if you've got something legitimately new to tell me, be loud about that and tell me about that. If you're solving a problem that you know I have, but perhaps I don't know I have, it's okay. Be really loud on that. But I think the other side of that coin is, you said it, operational. There's so much operational value in a lot of the tools that we have that I think we undersell. So I mean, I'm going through a process right now of looking across some of the acquisitions of security tools that we've done in the past couple of years, and again, I just had a recent conversation with one of those vendors and said, like, there's a lot of IT operations value in the thing that you have, and I'm using it for purely security use cases, which is great. I'm going to set up a conversation with like the IT infrastructure leadership around this tool, because I think they can leverage it for you, from you, right? I think they can get a lot of value in it in ways that I don't probably understand, or there's going to be things that are important to them that I'm not thinking about. That helps with budget. It helps with seeing your program as an ally to folks where you might be a little adversarial with it, and every now and then. So like, don't hide the operational value of a technology. I think sometimes as security vendors that people go straight after that security win, which might be the primary use case for your tool, but make sure it's like not on like page 6 of the glossy in one bullet point way at the bottom, that you can provide some IT operational value or cost savings or something like that on top of that, because that can be a driver for sure outside of security. I think I'll confess, I look at tools from a security control standpoint, from a security roadmap standpoint, from closing the gaps that I know kind of standpoint. But yeah, I mean, anyone that's doing this is under budgetary pressure. We're under people pressures. We're under those types of things. So anywhere where you can actually say that as part of your message and then deliver on it, don't shy away from that either.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really interesting way to kind of think about it. When you're looking at the future and you see a lot of promise, we talked about these different inflection points. We also talked about hype cycles, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of hype right now in technology around everything, never mind just AI, but everyone is doing their best to go and capture attention. We're in an attention economy, right? Yep. And so that's a big part of it. How do you separate fact and fiction outside of the 100% claims? Like, what are you looking for when you're sort of sifting through the signals and noise that are put out there where technology's going, that you may want to catch up and get ahead in some areas and experiment and be on the bleeding edge? And where are areas where you're maybe like, well, I'm going to wait and see what some of my peers do that are a little bit more enthusiastic about that? How do you make some of those decisions?
I honestly rely very heavily on my team for those types of things. I'm certainly not the expert in all of the various disciplines that are represented on my team. They're the experts. They understand the problems. They understand the technology far better than I do. So I honestly tell vendors a lot of the time, don't approach me with any of the messages that we were talking about. Yeah. Approach the person on my team and I'll make the connections. Sell them on it. Most of the technology choices and those types of things that happen on my team happen from the people that are actually doing it, right? Yeah. And on the other side of that, I look to them to talk to me about the future in their space, sure. Right? Like what are the problems that you have today in this space? Where do you want to take this in the future? That's what you want. But where do you see this? Where do you see this going? Where do you see this roadmap? I think roadmaps in this space need to be built in a sense to address the top-down problem. Right. But and on the technology side, much more of it needs to come from the bottom up than maybe does in some organizations. So I rely super heavy on my team in that. They're the domain experts. I can think about things from a more strategic perspective, but when I'm looking at technology roadmap type stuff, I would say in my teams, I look for that to be almost 100% driven by the folks that are actually doing that and putting hands on the tech.
Awesome. Any parting words? Any last thoughts on predictions or things that you're hoping to see in the next couple of years in the sort of technology shifts that we've talked about? Yeah, I mean, I look, if I could make predictions and I had a crystal ball, I probably what we said. We probably wouldn't be sitting here, right? I think we are in a hype cycle around things like AI, and that's very clear. So consolidation in that space is something that I would look to see, and maybe that can inform some of the stuff that we've talking about. If there are areas where you feel like there's a little bit of hype, probably don't be first mover there. There is you want to prove some of that stuff out, but if I've learned anything, honestly, in my career over the past 25 years, is that it's predictably unpredictable. Yeah, 100%. It's very, very difficult to predict where some of these things are going to go. You have to read the tea leaves a bit, but you have to be really, really willing and able to make some quick pivots. So I would say, stay agile in where we are. That's sure. Really. Interesting, because what we also talked about was the speed of development and the pace of innovation has gotten really fast. Really high, yeah. And so when you're hey, you've got to kind of pick it but be able to pivot, that requires a good sense of agility, because the world of IT 10 years ago, they're looking at 8, 9, 10-month deployments for certain technologies. There was 4 quarters of planning before you even would go into an evaluation. That could change the trajectory of innovation really fast. Just Absolutely. Looking at the pace of commercial or conventional, sort of B2C software over the 3 months is there's wild changes. So I can imagine that level of agility is putting a different kind of pressure on you and your team when it comes to staying 2 or 3 steps ahead. Anything that you've done in particular outside of what we described to stay agile when the train's moving a lot faster than it did maybe 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, you have to use it yourself. I mean, that's something that I would find reasons to use these tools and find reasons to use these technologies so that you can just have a sense as to what's good and what's not, what works and what doesn't. You need some experience as
right.
to, and that is something that is built over time, right? You get a sense for that in the space for sure. But yeah, I mean, stay hungry and still use those things. I look for people that are have the home lab and do those sort of things. Like that stuff's not going away. That is how I look and find new up and comers in as far as people goes.
Sure.
Because that shows that desire to want to do that, right? To stay a little bit ahead of the curve. And I think many times we are, maybe as individuals or programs or something like that, we might actually be a little bit more agile than the organization that's around us.
Right.
Can be frustrating, but it also can be one of those opportunities where we can be seen as drivers, right?
Right.
And not security, not just being this cost center and control center, but like as an enabler and driver. Find something new and cool in our space, and then bring that to the wider audience and tell the story, and maybe we can push some of that innovation cycle within our own organizations a little bit faster.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really encouraging take, right? Like on that.
Yeah.
You could go the opposite way and be like, it's over.
Yeah.
We gotta go.
Well, I think we said like dawn versus twilight. You and I talked about that when we were talking about that. Yeah, like you can take either viewpoint as to where we are in any given technology point of inflection. If you get down and down in the dumps on it, then that's a quick way to burn out really fast. I think you have to take a positive viewpoint of where we are.
Totally. And I think that's easier said than done, right? When you're looking at risk all day and the impact is so huge.
Yeah.
But it's super important. When you were talking earlier about setting that vision and setting that true north, I think that's probably a good thing to weave into that as well. Is like you're looking at a dawn, right? You're navigating through a new day as opposed to a dark night.
Exactly.
Very good.
100%.
Well, listen, this was awesome, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks.
This was a great conversation.